The birth of a legend. Muhammad Ali, a 1-2-year-old boy, stood in the pouring rain, tears streaming down his face, fists clenched so tight his knuckles turned white. His brand new red Schwinn bicycle, a gift from his father, the most precious thing he had ever owned, was gone. Stolen. He didn't know it yet, but this would be the most important day of his life. Not because of what he lost, but because of what he was about to find. Louisville, Kentucky, 1954. The Columbia Auditorium was hosting the Louisville Home Show, a local exhibition filled with free popcorn, candy, and crowds of families enjoying a rare day of entertainment. Young Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr. had ridden his beloved red Schwinn bicycle to the event with his best friend. For hours, they wandered through the exhibits, ate free snacks, and laughed like only 1-2-year-old boys can. But when they returned to where the bike was parked, it was gone. Cassius felt his heart drop into his stomach. That bike wasn't just a bike. His father, Cassius Clay Sr., had worked extra hours painting signs to afford it. It represented sacrifice, love, pride, and someone had just stolen it. The boy's first instinct was rage. Pure, unfiltered, burning rage. "I'm gonna find whoever took it," he shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. "And I'm gonna beat them up. I'm gonna whop them so bad they'll never steal again." His friend tried to calm him down, but Cassius was already storming through the building, asking everyone if they'd seen anything. Someone mentioned there was a police officer in the basement. A cop who ran a boxing gym. Cassius didn't care about boxing. He cared about justice, about revenge, about making someone pay for what they'd done. He ran down the stairs, tears still wet on his cheeks, and burst through the door. The basement smelled like sweat and leather. Punching bags hung from the ceiling. A small boxing ring sat in the corner, and there, standing with his arms crossed, was a white police officer named Joe Martin. Martin was a veteran cop who spent his off hours training young boxers. He'd seen hundreds of kids walk through that door. Some became fighters. Most quit within weeks. But he had never seen a kid quite like this one. Cassius was sobbing, shaking with anger, his words tumbling out in a furious rush. "Someone stole my bike. I'm gonna find them and I'm gonna whop them. I'm gonna beat them so bad." Joe Martin listened patiently. Then he asked a simple question that would alter the course of history. "Do you know how to fight?" Cassius paused. His chest was still heaving. His fists were still clenched. "No," he admitted, "but I'll learn. I'll learn just so I can whop whoever did this." Joe Martin looked at the skinny kid in front of him, barely 89 pounds, soaking wet from the rain, crying over a stolen bicycle. But there was something in those eyes, something fierce, something unbreakable. Martin had seen tough kids before, kids from the streets, kids with chips on their shoulders. This was different. This kid had fire. "Well," Joe Martin said slowly, "you better come back tomorrow. I'll teach you how to box, but I'm warning you, it's the hardest thing you'll ever do." Cassius wiped his tears. He didn't know that he would never find the thief. He didn't know that he would never get his bike back. But he would get something far more valuable. He would discover his destiny. And the world would never be the same. The next morning, Cassius Clay woke up before sunrise. Most kids would have forgotten about the boxing gym. Most kids would have moved on, let the anger fade, accepted the loss. But Cassius wasn't most kids. He was at the gym door before Joe Martin even arrived. And what happened over the next 6 weeks would prove that this wasn't just a phase. This wasn't just revenge. This was the birth of the greatest fighter who ever lived. Cassius Clay couldn't throw a proper punch. He couldn't move his feet right. He couldn't keep his guard up. He couldn't do a single thing that resembled boxing. But he had something that couldn't be taught. He had an obsession that bordered on madness. The Columbia gym became Cassius's second home. Every single day, rain or shine, sick or healthy, tired or energized, the 1-2-year-old boy showed up. He was the first to arrive and the last to leave. Joe Martin had trained young boxers for years. He knew the pattern. Kids would come in hot, full of energy and dreams, talking about becoming champions. Then reality would hit. The sore muscles, the bloody noses, the exhaustion that seeped into your bones. Most kids quit within the first month. Cassius was different. The more it hurt, the harder he worked. The more he failed, the more determined he became. At home, Cassius's life transformed completely. He stopped eating junk food. While other kids in the neighborhood ate candy and drank soda, Cassius drank water and ate lean meals. His mother, Odessa Clay, watched in amazement as her son refused dessert night after night. "I'm in training," he would say. "Champions don't eat pie." He was 12 years old. He started running before school. Every morning at 5 a.m., while Louisville was still dark and quiet, young Cassius would lace up his shoes and run through the streets. His neighbors thought he was crazy. His classmates thought he was weird. But Cassius didn't care what anyone thought. He had a vision that no one else could see. Not everyone believed in him. Some of the older boys at the gym laughed at the skinny newcomer. They called him Motormouth because he never stopped talking. They said he was too small, too weak, too inexperienced. During sparring sessions, they hit him harder than necessary. They wanted to break him, to teach him a lesson, to make him quit like all the others. But every time Cassius got knocked down, something strange happened. He smiled. He got back up, wiped the blood from his lip, and said, "That all you got?" It infuriated them. And it fascinated Joe Martin. One evening, after a particularly brutal sparring session, Joe Martin pulled Cassius aside. "Kid, why do you keep coming back? Those boys are twice your size. They're hurting you on purpose." Cassius looked at his trainer with those intense eyes. Because one day, he said, "I'm gonna be the heavyweight champion of the world, and when I am, I'm gonna come back here and thank every single one of them because they're making me stronger." Joe Martin had heard a lot of kids make big claims, but something about the way this 1-2-year-old said it, he believed it. The weeks turned into months. The months turned into years. Cassius Clay's transformation was nothing short of remarkable. His body changed. The skinny 89-pound kid began to develop lean, powerful muscles. His shoulders broadened. His arms grew longer and stronger. But the physical changes were nothing compared to what was happening inside his mind. Joe Martin noticed it first. Most boxers were reactive. They waited for their opponent to make a move, then responded. Cassius was different. He was always thinking 3 moves ahead. He studied other fighters like a scientist studies specimens. He analyzed footwork, timing, patterns. "That kid's got a brain in his head," Martin told his wife one night, "and it never stops working." Cassius developed a style that no one had ever seen before. While other boxers planted their feet and traded heavy blows, Cassius danced. He moved around the ring like water, fluid, and impossible to catch. His feet barely seemed to touch the canvas. The older boxers didn't know what to make of it. "That's not real boxing," they scoffed. "He's just running away." But Joe Martin saw the genius in it. "He's not running," Martin observed. "He's making you miss, and while you're missing, he's hitting. That's the future of boxing right there." Cassius was inventing a new style of fighting, and he was only 13 years old. During a training session, Joe Martin asked Cassius about his unusual movement. The young boxer smiled, that confident, magnetic smile that would one day captivate the world. "Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee," he said. Martin laughed. "Where'd you hear that?" "I didn't hear it anywhere," Cassius replied. "I made it up. That's what I do. I float, I sting. They can't hit what they can't see." It was the first glimpse of the philosophy that would define his career. The combination of physical brilliance and mental warfare. The understanding that boxing wasn't just about fists. It was about psychology, about confidence, about making your opponent beat himself before you ever threw a punch. By the time Cassius Clay turned 14, he had fought in his first amateur match. He won. Then he won again. And again. Within 2 years, he was the most talked about amateur boxer in Kentucky. But the local success was just the beginning. Cassius had his eyes on something much bigger. Something that would take him far from Louisville. Something that would introduce him to the entire world. And the road to get there would test everything he believed about himself. By 1956, word had spread through Kentucky's boxing circles. There was a kid in Louisville who couldn't be touched. A kid who talked more trash than fighters twice his age. A kid who backed up every single word with his fists. His name was Cassius Clay. And he was just getting started. The lights of the amateur boxing arena felt like fire on his skin. Cassius Clay, now 14 years old, stood in his corner, bouncing on his toes, rolling his shoulders. Across the ring, his opponent, a boy 2 years older and 15 pounds heavier, glared at him with undisguised contempt. The older boy had heard about Clay, the loudmouth kid who never stopped talking, the skinny dancer who thought he was special. Tonight, he planned to shut that mouth for good. The bell rang. What happened next became local legend. Clay exploded from his corner. Not forward, sideways. He circled left, then right, then left again. His feet barely touched the canvas. His opponent lunged forward, throwing heavy punches that cut through empty air. Miss. 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 The crowd gasped. They had never seen anyone move like this. It was like trying to punch smoke. Then Clay countered. 3 quick jabs, so fast they were barely visible, each one landing clean on his opponent's face. Pop, pop, pop. The older boy stumbled backward, shocked. Where did those punches come from? How could someone move that fast? Clay smiled, that infuriating, confident smile. "You're too slow, man," he shouted, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "I could do this all night." The audience didn't know whether to cheer or gasp at the audacity. This became Cassius Clay's signature. It wasn't enough to beat his opponents. He needed to demoralize them, to break their spirit before breaking their will. He would predict what round he'd win in. He would write poems mocking his opponents. He would stand flat-footed in the ring, hands at his sides, dodging punches just to prove he could. "He's either the most arrogant kid I've ever seen," one amateur coach remarked, "or he's a genius. Maybe both." It was both. Cassius understood something that most fighters never grasped. Boxing was as much a mental game as a physical one. If you could make your opponent doubt himself, if you could make him angry, frustrated, confused, you had already won half the battle. And Cassius Clay never let anyone doubt who was in control. Between 1956 and 1959, Cassius Clay compiled an amateur record that stunned the boxing world. 100 wins. Only 5 losses. He won the Golden Gloves tournament 6 times. He won the Amateur Athletic Union national title twice. Every time he stepped into the ring, he dominated. And every time he won, he told anyone who would listen exactly what he planned to do next. "I'm gonna be the heavyweight champion of the world." Most people laughed, but fewer and fewer people were laughing now. While other teenagers in Louisville were chasing girls, staying out late, and experimenting with alcohol and cigarettes, Cassius Clay lived like a monk. He didn't smoke, never took a single drag. He didn't drink, not a drop of alcohol ever touched his lips. He didn't chase parties or waste time on distractions. His brother Rahman, then called Rudolph, watched in amazement. Cassius was different from everyone else. Rahman later recalled. While the rest of us were being kids, he was training, always training. It was like he could see something the rest of us couldn't. Cassius had a vision of his future so clear, so vivid, so absolute that nothing could distract him from it. He would visualize himself as champion. He would see the belt around his waist, feel the roar of the crowd, taste the victory. Every night before sleep, he would close his eyes and live in that future reality. Then he would wake up and work to make it real. In 1959, a buzz began to build in American boxing circles. The 1960 Summer Olympics would be held in Rome, Italy. For amateur boxers, the Olympics represented the ultimate stage, the chance to compete against the best fighters from around the world, the opportunity to win a gold medal for your country. And for Cassius Clay, it was the next step in his master plan. "I'm going to Rome," he announced to Joe Martin. "I'm going to win that gold medal, and then I'm going to turn professional and become the greatest fighter of all time." Joe Martin smiled. Other coaches might have tempered expectations. They might have said, "Let's focus on the qualifiers first," or "Don't get ahead of yourself." But Martin had long since stopped doubting this kid. "Then let's get you ready," he said. But there was a problem. A problem that Cassius Clay had never told anyone about. A secret fear that threatened to derail everything. Cassius Clay was terrified of flying. The Rome Olympics would require a transatlantic flight over 20 hours in the air, crossing the vast Atlantic Ocean. For a young man who had never left the American South, who had never been on an airplane, the thought was paralyzing. He tried to hide it, tried to push it down. But as the Olympic trials approached and the reality of Rome grew closer, the fear grew stronger. What if the plane crashed? What if something went wrong over the ocean? What if he died before he ever had the chance to become champion? The fear was so intense that at one point, Cassius seriously considered not going. He considered giving up his Olympic dream. He considered letting fear win. The Olympic trials were weeks away. Cassius Clay, the most confident young boxer in America, was paralyzed by a fear he couldn't punch his way through. He had trained for 6 years. He had sacrificed everything. He had told the whole world what he was going to do. But now, standing at the threshold of his destiny, he faced an opponent he had never encountered before. Himself. How do you fight an enemy that lives inside your own mind? Cassius Clay was about to find out. Everyone knew Cassius Clay as the loudest, most confident boxer in America. No one knew he spent the nights before the Olympic trials throwing up from anxiety. Not because of the fights ahead, because of the flight. Joe Martin found him one morning at the gym hours before the facility opened. Cassius wasn't training, he was sitting in the corner, staring at the floor. In 6 years, Martin had never seen him like this. The kid who bounced off walls with energy, the kid who never stopped moving, never stopped talking, never stopped believing. "What's wrong?" Martin asked. For a long moment, Cassius didn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't think I can go to Rome." Martin thought he had misheard. "What are you talking about?" "The plane, Joe." Cassius looked up, and for the first time, Martin saw genuine terror in those eyes. "I can't get on that plane. I'm scared. I'm really scared." The admission hung in the air between them. For Cassius Clay, admitting fear was almost as terrifying as the fear itself. He had built his entire identity around supreme confidence, around being untouchable, around being a champion before he ever won a title. And now, here he was, admitting that he was scared of an airplane. "I've had nightmares," he continued, the words spilling out now. "The plane going down over the ocean, drowning, dying before I ever get to prove what I can do. I keep seeing it, Joe. Every time I close my eyes." Joe Martin sat down next to his fighter. "Cassius, do you believe in yourself?" "More than anything." "Do you believe you're going to be heavyweight champion of the world?" "Yes, I know I am." "Then let me ask you something." Martin leaned forward. "Do you think God or the universe or fate or whatever you want to call it would let you come this far just to die in a plane crash? You haven't done what you're meant to do yet. You haven't become who you're meant to be. That plane isn't going to crash because you have work to do." Cassius sat with those words. Something shifted in him. He had always believed in destiny, had always felt that he was meant for something extraordinary, that his path was written in the stars. If that was true, if he was truly destined for greatness, then nothing could stop him. Not fear, not doubt, not a plane ride over the Atlantic Ocean. He had to trust his own legend. But Cassius Clay wouldn't be Cassius Clay without doing things his own way. On the day of the flight to Rome, he showed up at the airport wearing something unusual. A parachute. An actual army surplus parachute strapped to his back. His teammates burst out laughing. The coaches shook their heads. Airport officials had no idea what to do with him. "Clay, you can't wear a parachute on a commercial flight." Cassius grinned that familiar, magnetic grin, but his eyes were still tight with fear. "Watch me." He wore that parachute for the entire flight, wouldn't take it off, stayed awake for most of the journey, gripping the armrests, praying quietly, but he got on the plane. He faced his fear, and he flew to Rome. The plane touched down in Italy without incident. Cassius Clay stepped onto foreign soil for the first time in his life. Rome, the eternal city, ancient cobblestone streets, magnificent architecture, the echoes of gladiators from 2,000 years ago. As he walked through the city, something remarkable happened. The fear was gone. Not diminished, not suppressed, gone. He had faced the thing that terrified him most, and he had survived. He had proven to himself that he could do the impossible. If he could conquer that fear, he could conquer anything. He could conquer anyone. The boxing world had no idea what was coming. The 1,960 Olympic boxing competition featured fighters from 47 countries. Light heavyweights, middleweights, heavyweights, the best amateur fighters on earth, all gathered in Rome to determine who was truly the best. Cassius Clay was 18 years old. He walked through the Olympic Village like he owned it. While other athletes were overwhelmed by the magnitude of the event, Cassius was himself. He introduced himself to everyone. Fighters from Poland, Australia, the Soviet Union, it didn't matter. He would walk up, shake their hand, and announce, "My name is Cassius Clay. I'm going to win the gold medal. Nice to meet you." Some fighters laughed, some were annoyed, some were genuinely confused by this loud American kid who seemed to have zero self-doubt. But everyone remembered him. The Olympic light heavyweight bracket was stacked with dangerous fighters. Cassius Clay's first opponent was a Belgian boxer named Yvon Bicot, a seasoned European champion with a powerful right hand. The experts gave Clay a chance, but warned that his unconventional style might not work against international competition. European boxers were fundamentally sound. They knew how to cut off the ring. They knew how to neutralize movement. Clay would need more than dancing to win gold. The bell rang. Clay came out like a hurricane. He didn't dance around Bicot. He attacked. He threw combinations from angles the Belgian had never seen. He varied his speed, slow, blinding fast, keeping his opponent perpetually off balance. The first round was competitive. The second round was domination. By the third round, Bicot was completely lost. He had never faced anyone who moved like this, who thought like this, who made him feel so utterly outclassed. Unanimous decision, Cassius Clay. 1 down, 3 to go. The next opponent was Gennady Shatkov of the Soviet Union, a dangerous, experienced fighter who had already won Olympic medals. The Soviet team was confident. Their boxer had faced Americans before. He knew how to handle them. He had never faced Cassius Clay. 3 rounds later, another unanimous decision. Then came Tony Madigan of Australia, a bronze medalist from Melbourne, fighting on home turf, relatively speaking, with a passionate following. Madigan was clever, tough, and determined. Clay won anyway. 3 fights, 3 dominant victories, 1 fight remaining. The gold medal match. Standing between Cassius Clay and Olympic immortality was Zbigniew Pietrzyskowski of Poland. Pietrzyskowski was not like the other opponents. He was a 3-time European champion, a southpaw left-handed, which created awkward angles that conventional fighters couldn't handle. He was smart, experienced, and battle-tested at the highest levels. The experts said this was the real test. If Clay had any weaknesses, Pietrzyskowski would find them. The whole world was about to watch. And Cassius Clay was about to show them who he really was. 70 nations, 200 million viewers worldwide, and one 18-year-old kid from Louisville, Kentucky, who had told everyone exactly what he was going to do. Now he had to prove it. The Palazzo dello Sport was electric. 15,000 spectators packed the arena, flags from dozens of nations waving in the stands, journalists from every major newspaper in the world sat ringside, notebooks ready. This was the Olympic final. This was where legends were made. Cassius Clay bounced in his corner, shadowboxing, moving his feet in that impossible rhythm. Across the ring, Zbigniew Pietrzyskowski stood stone-faced, focused, ready. The Polish fighter had studied film of Clay. He knew about the dancing, he knew about the speed, he knew about the psychological games. He wasn't intimidated. He had beaten faster opponents, he had beaten flashier opponents, he had 3 European championships to prove it. The bell rang. Pietrzyskowski came out aggressive. His southpaw stance created angles that Clay hadn't seen before. Punches came from unexpected directions. The Polish fighter's jab was sharp, accurate, and relentless. For the first time in the tournament, Clay looked uncomfortable. He was still moving, still dancing, but Pietrzyskowski was cutting off the ring, forcing him into corners, making him fight in phone booths instead of open spaces. The first round was close. Too close. In his corner, Clay's handlers saw something they had never seen before. Doubt. But doubt didn't live long in Cassius Clay's mind. Between rounds, he sat on his stool, breathing heavily, thinking, calculating. His brain, that remarkable brain that saw patterns others missed, was working. Pietrzyskowski was a counter-puncher. He wanted Clay to attack so he could counter. He was using his southpaw stance to create confusion. So Clay made an adjustment. He stopped trying to outbox the Polish fighter. He decided to outwork him instead. The second round was different. Clay came out with a relentless pace. He threw more punches than he had in any previous fight. Not just jabs, combinations, hooks, uppercuts, left hands, right hands, punches from angles that seemed physically impossible. Pietrzykowski was overwhelmed. The Polish fighter had prepared for the dancing. He had prepared for the movement. He had not prepared for this, a violent storm of leather and speed that never let up. By the end of the second round, Pietrzykowski's left eye was starting to swell. The momentum had shifted. The third round was a masterclass. Clay was everywhere and nowhere. He would appear on Pietrzykowski's left, then vanish and reappear on his right. He would feint high and strike low. He would fake retreat, then explode forward. The Polish fighter, the three-time European champion, looked completely lost. The crowd began to chant, "Clay, Clay, Clay." 15,000 people from dozens of countries united in admiration for this extraordinary young American. This wasn't just boxing, this was art. By the fourth round, it was essentially over. Pietrzykowski was exhausted, frustrated, and visibly beaten. He continued to fight, he was a champion, after all, but everyone knew the outcome. Clay could have coasted, could have played it safe, danced around, protected his lead. Instead, he turned up the pressure. He threw more punches in the fourth round than some fighters throw in entire fights. He dominated every second, every exchange, every moment. When the final bell rang, there was no doubt. The judges' scorecards were unanimous. Cassius Clay, Olympic gold medalist, the national anthem of the United States of America echoed through the Palazzo dello Sport. Cassius Clay stood on the highest platform, the gold medal around his neck, tears streaming down his face. He had done it. Everything he had said, every prediction, every boast, every bold declaration, he had backed it all up. 6 years after a police officer asked him if he knew how to fight, Cassius Clay stood on top of the world. The skinny 12-year-old who just wanted his bike back was now an Olympic champion. After the ceremony, something happened that became legendary. Cassius Clay refused to take off his gold medal. Not that day. Not that night. Not the next day. He wore it everywhere. To dinner, to press conferences, to bed. He wore it swimming. He wore it walking through the streets of Rome. When asked why he wouldn't take it off, he smiled that radiant smile. "I worked too hard for this. I'm never letting it go." For weeks after returning home, the medal stayed around his neck. He wore it to restaurants, to church, to family gatherings. Some people thought he was being arrogant. They were missing the point. That medal represented everything. Every 5 a.m. run, every skip party, every bloody nose in the gym, every moment of doubt overcome. It was proof that a poor black kid from Louisville could dream the impossible and make it real. It was proof that he was exactly who he said he was. But the gold medal was just the beginning. Cassius Clay returned to the United States as a hero. Magazine covers, newspaper headlines, television appearances. The whole country wanted to know about the charming young boxer who had conquered Rome. But America in 1960 was a complicated place for a young black man. Even an Olympic champion. What happened next would test Cassius Clay in ways that boxing never could. And it would begin to transform him into someone even greater. He had conquered the world. He had beaten the best fighters on earth. He had made his country proud. But when Cassius Clay returned to Louisville, Kentucky, he discovered that an Olympic gold medal couldn't buy him a hamburger. The parade down Broadway Avenue was everything a young hero could dream of. Thousands of people lined the streets, bands played, confetti fell from buildings, signs read "Welcome Home Champ" and "Louisville's Pride." Cassius Clay sat in the back of a convertible, waving to the crowd, that gold medal still around his neck, that $1 million smile still on his face. For a few hours, everything was perfect. He was a champion. He was loved. He was home. Later that evening, Cassius and a friend decided to get something to eat. They walked into a local restaurant, a place Cassius had walked past hundreds of times as a kid, but had never been allowed inside. He was wearing his gold medal. He was the most famous athlete in Louisville. He had just represented the United States of America on the world stage. He sat down at a table. The waitress approached, but something was wrong. She didn't offer a menu. "We don't serve coloreds here," she said. Cassius Clay stared at her. For a long moment, he couldn't speak. He looked down at the medal around his neck, the medal he had won for his country, the medal that represented years of sacrifice, dedication, and triumph. Then he looked around the restaurant, at the white faces staring at him, at the fear and hatred in their eyes. This was America in 1960, where a black man could win gold for his country, could be celebrated in parades, could be called a hero, but couldn't eat a hamburger in his own hometown. That night, Cassius Clay sat alone by the Ohio River. The river that divided Louisville from Indiana, the river that separated North from South, freedom from oppression, hope from history. He held the gold medal in his hands. And for the first time, he truly understood something that would shape the rest of his life. Winning wasn't enough. Being a champion wasn't enough. If he was going to change anything, if he was going to matter, he needed to become more than a boxer. He needed to become a voice. There's a story disputed by some, believed by many, that on that night, Cassius Clay threw his Olympic gold medal into the Ohio River. Whether it literally happened or not, the symbolism is undeniable. Something died in Cassius Clay that day, and something greater was born. He would go on to become the heavyweight champion of the world 3 times. He would change his name to Muhammad Ali. He would refuse to fight in the Vietnam War, declaring, "I ain't got no quarrel with them Viet Cong." He would become the most famous athlete on earth. He would become a symbol of resistance, courage, and unshakable belief. But it all started with a stolen bicycle. Years later, when asked about the journey from Louisville to Olympic glory to World Championship, Muhammad Ali would offer simple wisdom. Champions aren't made in gyms. Champions are made from something they have deep inside them, a desire, a dream, a vision. They have to have the skill and the will. But the will must be stronger than the skill. He had the skill. God knows he had the skill. But more than that, he had the will. The will to wake up at 5 a.m. while others slept. The will to say no to every temptation that could weaken him. The will to face his fears, whether on an airplane or in a segregated restaurant. The will to believe in himself when no one else did. Impossible is just a word thrown around by small men who find it easier to live in the world they've been given than to explore the power they have to change it. He explored that power. He changed the world. And this was just the beginning. The Olympic gold medal was the first chapter of a story that would span decades. A story of impossible victories, of standing against empires, of losing everything and rising again. The story of Cassius Clay was ending. The story of Muhammad Ali was about to begin. And the world would never be the same